Good morning, everyone. This is Christy Underwood, Executive Officer with the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. Since we currently don't have a chair of this committee, I'm going to go ahead and open up the meeting. And the first thing we will do is call the roll, and we will. Oh, we have one more of our members joining, so I will pause for just a second.
This is the moderator. Looks like Brandy Hamilton is still connecting her audio.
Okay.
She has her hand raised. It looks like she might potentially be our call-in user for audio, but I'm going to check with staff just to confirm.
Yes, that is correct. She is the call-in.
Let me go ahead and promote that up. All right. And then Brandy, can I get a quick mic check from you? Brandy, on the phone, I believe it's *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Looks like we are ready to go then. We will go ahead and turn this meeting over to Marcy Meliza, and she will go ahead and call the roll for us.
Good morning, everybody. I'll go ahead and take the roll. Member Crabtree?
Present.
Member Isbell?
Here.
Member Bryson?
Here.
Member Burr?
Here.
Member Crossett?
Here.
Member Hambleton?
Present.
Member Hart?
Here.
Member Johnson?
Here.
Member, Rice, I apologize. Bryson? Mark?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm here.
Thank you. Member Rosti?
Here.
Member Yoon?
Present.
And Member Calamay Pham I am not going to be here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first item of business is that we need to elect a chair for this committee. The chair of this committee kind of runs the committee through the agenda. It doesn't take a lot. So at this time, I will open it up to any nominations for election of a committee chairperson. You can nominate yourself or you can nominate another member.
It's just Jacqueline and I on the phone, correct? Jackie?
For board members, correct.
But it can be anyone or just board members?
It can be anyone.
Oh, okay, great. Not me. Thank you. I was gonna nominate Callie Mae, but just because she's not here. Yeah, all good.
I can nominate myself.
There we go.
Jackie Crabtree.
Awesome. So we have a nomination for Jackie Crabtree. Do we have a second?
I second. Thank you, Jackie.
Any discussion from the members? Hearing none, we will go ahead and open this up for public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this agenda item, please go ahead and click that Q&A button down at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment. It looks like we do already have a request for public comment. from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Muting me, that's great. Thank you for the nomination of Jackie Crabtree. I feel that she understands the current regulations very well as a member of the industry. And thank you very much. Good seeing you all.
All right. This is the moderator, and it appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right.
At this time, we will do a roll call vote for the nomination, and I will turn it over to Marcine to go ahead and do the roll call.
Okay, great. Voting for Jackie Crabtree. First person is Jackie Crabtree.
Yes.
Reese Isbell,
Yes.
Paul Bryson,
Yes.
Lorianne Burr,
Yes.
Dee Dee Crossett,
Thanks for doing this, Jackie. Yes.
Brandy Hamilton, Brandy Hamilton.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Brandon Hart,
Yes.
Paula Johnson,
Yes.
Mark Rierson,
Yes.
Leslie Rosti,
Yes.
and Yumi Yang.
Yes, thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Everybody voted yes.
All right. With that being said, Jackie, welcome to being our new chair.
Thank you. I will do a good job for you all.
All right, Jackie, would you like me to continue on the agenda?
Yes, please. I want to turn it back over to you.
Okay. So the next item is actually my item. It's the executive officer's opening remarks. So I want to thank everyone for volunteering to be on this committee. We have a lot of new members today and some who have been with us for a little while. I especially want to thank our members from our other agencies who are participating in this. Brandon Hart, who's from DIR, Department of Industrial Relations, as well as Paula Johnson, who's from CDPH. So thank you both for joining in as well. I wanted to give a little background that the Health and Safety Advisory Committee is a statutorily mandated committee, which is a little different than some of the board's other committees. So this one is actually required by statute to hold this meeting. And the purpose of this meeting is for this committee to advise the board on any health and safety outstanding issues, trends, and one of the first things that this committee has taken on has been our health and safety regulations, which is in your packet today, which we will get to here in just a few minutes. Again, I just wanted to emphasize that it is a statutorily mandated committee, and that today we are also looking at our citation and fine schedule. And so the board has decided that this committee would be the best place to take in those discussions. So I can tell you that today I do not anticipate we will get through all of the second major item on your agenda. I think it will likely prompt lots of discussion with our citations. So we will look to schedule another meeting. And then in the future, what we're really going to be looking at as well is hearing from each of you that what is happening in the industry, what are the health and safety risks, and how can we better address those concerns in California. So that being said, we will go ahead and move on to our first item, which is approval of our past board meeting committee meeting minutes. So what we would need on that is a motion to approve the minutes from the last committee meeting.
This is Jackie. I'd like to put a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. Any comments from anyone on the committee? Hearing none, we will go ahead and open this up to public comment on this agenda item.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. All right. With no other discussion on this item, I will have Marcine call the roll for a vote on the minutes.
Great, thank you. Jackie Crabtree,
Yes.
Reese Isbell,
Yes.
Paul Bryson,
Yes.
Lorianne Burr,
Yes.
Dee Dee Crescent,
Yes.
Brandy Hamilton,
Yes.
Brandon Hart,
Yes.
Paula Johnson,
Yes.
Mark Rierson,
Yes.
Leslie Rosti,
Yes.
and Yumi Yang.
Okay. Okay. First of all, my name is Yumi Yoon, and yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So that motion passes and those minutes are approved. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the discussion and possible action regarding the recommendations to the board on the amendments to the health and safety regulations. So some background for some of our newer members on this committee. First, I want to say that because this committee is open to the public, we do run this meeting according to the Opens Meeting Act. So we do, if it's new to some of you who are just joining us, that is why we are following this process that we are following. So just so you know, it is a formal process. So we have to take our public comment when needed, and we have to, make our motions and our seconds. So just in case you were wondering why we make such things so formal, that's why we have to do that. So moving on to agenda item number 5, which is an item in your packet. So the past Health and Safety Committee has worked quite extensively on updating the health and safety regulations. And what we have in front of you today is what those regulations would look like if those, if approved and sent to the board. So I want to make clear what the committee's role is in this aspect today. This committee will make a recommendation to move this item to the board. And once that item gets moved to the board, the board can do lots of different things. They can ask for change, they can ask for more information, they could send it back to this committee. There's lots of steps that the board could take, or the board could approve what the committee has done and ask that the regulation process be started. I just want to stress that the regulation process is quite extensive and very long. So what you're seeing today will likely not be what ends up actually in regulations. And we're talking a couple of years for this process. This is an extensive regulation package. When we change anything with health and safety, these regulations not only have to be reviewed by several entities in our own Department of Consumer Affairs, but they also have to be reviewed by the Department of Public Health. And I forgot the name of public health for a second. Sorry about that. So this is a long process, and I don't want to take away from all the work that has already been done by the committee and by its previous members, because these regs have been being worked on for possibly about 3 years. COVID did derail, as with most things, this committee, so there were not meetings during the very hard times of COVID. And so instead of giving you the actual regulatory language to show what was changing, what was staying, we wanted you to see it for how it would look if you choose to send this to the board. One of the things we have to make sure when we do health and safety regulations is that we don't change or change as little as possible to the numbering of any regulatory section. And that is because we're required to know the history of violations. So if we have a regulation that is 979A, and that means you weren't disinfecting a tool, and we've cited an establishment for this 3 times in the last 5 years. Well, if our regulations change 979A to something totally different now, we would lose that history. And the history is what we rely on to do disciplinary actions, to cite the right fine amount, because we have escalating fine amounts. So it's super important that we try not to change any of the numbering and the content in each of those numbering. So that's kind of what we've been working on since our last meeting, is making sure that these changes aren't going to severely impact our database and we would lose history. So given that these regulations have been being worked on for a good 2 to 3 years with our health and safety committee, and now that we have new committee members, what I would ask of the committee today is, unless you have something that you can't live with, especially, obviously our licensees that are on the phone today or the meeting today, we never want to make a regulation that you see and think it can't be implemented in your salon for whatever reason, that it's completely impossible. We've always had licensees on our health and safety committee, and that's the main reason why we do that. So unless there's something that you really want to see changed in that we can change today, keep in mind that this regulation package is going to see lots of changes, and there's lots more opportunities to change. What we'd really like to see today from a staff perspective is that these regulations do get sent to the board for review. Because we've had these regs for so long, we would like to get them to a board meeting for review and open it up to even more public comment to hear how these regulations may need to be changed even more. So that's from a staff perspective, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for anything that you see in the regulations that you absolutely want changed, and if not, that we can send these to the board today with approval to move it to the board for further review. And again, I can't stress how much time it takes to get regulations through, especially this one that is so extensive. It's going to be quite extensive. So we're hoping this can just move to the next process. So with that being said, I would open it up to the committee for any comments that you have on this agenda item.
Good morning. This is Jackie Crabtree. I served on this committee before, and I know how much work we did do on the language. In reviewing it, I see that everything in there is to my liking, and I don't feel that there needs to be any change because we know it's going to be a longer process. I think I'm more concerned with the next part when we start talking about fines, so that we can figure out how to fine people who keep continuing to do the same things. So that would just be my take on it. But other than that, I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the hard work.
Anyone else have any comments?
Hi,
This is
Paul
Brandy.
Bryson here.
Hi, Paul. I hear you have some echo, but maybe it's gone now.
How about now?
Perfect.
All right. I brought this up last time, but somehow it didn't get changed. With the brushes, 986A2. Clean a brush with a cleansing agent such as an EPA-registered disinfectant spray, monomer, makeup brush liquid spray cleaner, or isopropyl alcohol. There's two issues there. EPA-registered disinfectants are not supposed to go on skin. So to use them on an application brush is problematic. Secondly, cleaning a brush with a monomer is only appropriate if you're using it to apply monomer. You wouldn't want to take any other kind of brush and clean it with monomer. So I'm just currently right now composing an email rephrasing those, and I'm going to send it to you. That's the only problem I
Okay.
see.
Can we look at that section right now and I just make sure I understand? We have one, remove visible debris. Are you good with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so it's number 2 where it says clean with a cleansing agent such as an EPA registered disinfectant spray.
Right.
So number 2 is the problem.
Yeah, you don't put disinfectants. I mean, you use a disinfectant on a foot spa or a tool, but it's thoroughly rinsed. And
Got it.
brushes are a bit more sensitive.
Can
I
we
don't have.
just say clean with a cleansing agent?
That would work, but it kind of opens the door to many things. See, if we specify EPA registered disinfectant, somebody will do that. But if we
Right.
don't specify EPA registered disinfectant, somebody may do that anyway because they think, oh, that's a cleansing agent. We would want them to. We would want to not do that. So, a makeup brush liquid spray cleaner. I assume that's designed for makeup brushes. Isopropyl alcohol, that'll clean everything. Monomer will clean a monomer brush.
Right.
So strike the EPA registered disinfectant spray, and for monomer, I would add that as monomer parentheses for monomer application brushes only.
Got it.
So
Okay.
which email you want me to send that to?
If you could send that to me, that would be great. And then I have that change as well.
Okay. I had my cameras closed while I was typing this, so who's me?
Oh, sorry, it's Christy.
Oh, okay. That's easy.
I just assume everyone knows my voice in California. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Paul.
That's my only comment, and it'll be in your email box momentarily.
Perfect.
And now I'm going on mute unless anybody else has questions for me, which I sort of doubt.
Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else have
Brandy
any?
Hamilton.
Hi, Brandy. We do have a strong.
This is the moderator. Brandy, it looks like I might have your audio. It looks like you have your audio connected twice. Let me demote the phone, and then if you could use the unmute on your computer, I think that might work out better and not cause that echo. So can you try unmuting on your computer? Let me see if I can send a request to unmute and see if that works. It looks like you're unmuted, but unfortunately I'm unable to hear you, Brandy. You may want to turn this the sound off on your computer because it's feeding into your phone. I'm going to promote your phone back up so you can unmute yourself and speak. All right, so your phone connection's back on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you, and there's no
I
echo.
apologize. My computer doesn't have a microphone, so I was trying to do two things at once.
No worries.
I have a speaker, but not a microphone. Anyways, I just wanted to piggyback on the same content that Paul was commenting on regarding the brushes. And I agree with all of the language as well, but it's not really clear regarding the appropriate use of natural hair bristles in regards to makeup brushes and some hair brushes. And the fact that you can disinfect to a degree, but they're not, again, you're not using like a barbicide or those types of chemicals that indicate that it must be then placed onto the skin. They would just be really using like an antibacterial type of soap.
Okay. I know we've had issues with this section so much, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
I will go to next. I'm going to go to Dee Dee Crossett, who has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you. I apologize. My flight got messed up today, so it's a little noisy back here. But I just want to, and this might not be the appropriate place, and you can tell me that. When it comes to the linen section of the health and safety guidelines, is there a way to specify what schools need to do to teach that? And maybe this is a side note, just because there have been some schools in the middle of the country and East Coast that had students doing over and beyond cleaning duties. And so many schools, mine included, have hired like laundry services and things like that to avoid lawsuits. But it is a missing window. Is there some way to put in the health and safety guidelines that they should actually learn, not just from a book, but actually they should do a load of laundry in school? Because you would be shockingly surprised how many people don't know how to do laundry. Like, we would love to show them, but many schools right now are a little gun shy of the students doing laundry because of some lawsuits that took place on the East Coast and in the Midwest in regards to, they had students cleaning toilets and doing laundry and all this stuff that wasn't appropriate, but the laundry came up. So many of us are like, but it is important. You know, I was in the clinic 2 days ago, we had somebody bring a bed bug in, and I had to go through the whole process of like how to do laundry and all that. But is there some way to get that schools need to physically show them, and the students should practice that as a physical operation? Because as these hands-on learners, if we just talk about it in a book, they don't learn it as well as like hot to the touch. What does that mean? And how do you, I mean, I hate to say it, they don't know how to do laundry. Like, I wish it's there. Anyway, if there's a way to include that, or is that another area?
I think it would be a different area, but I think we can make a note to try to look further at that.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I'll go to Leslie Rosti.
I just wanted to go back to what Paul was talking about with the brushes, since we've hashed over this brush thing a million times, it feels like, and you're not the only state doing it. I think the reason that we have the EPA registered disinfectant in there is because this encompasses all brushes, including hair brushes. So the effort would be to reduce the spread of things like ringworm, that type of thing. So it may be that we have to make number 2 be more specific to it being the appropriate cleaner and or disinfectant for the item versus just making this list. You know, I wouldn't want someone to use, for example, a monomer on a hairbrush either.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of cleaning up we can do in number 2, but not removing the disinfectant, because I would want that on a hairbrush.
So make section 986 specific to brush type. So basically separate out the hair brushes, the makeup, facial brushes, and nail brushes.
Yeah, either that or just make them responsible to know, clean with the appropriate cleansing or disinfecting agent based on what brush you're using, right? Either we tell them what the right thing is, or we make them, you know, understand they need to figure out what's the appropriate thing in that list. But in my mind, if we're talking about all brushes in a group, all those things belong there.
Okay. I'm going to go next to It's looking not a very good moderator here. Lorraine Burr.
Yes. So I had an idea, continuing what Leslie said, was, is it possible to state follow manufacturer guidelines for sanitation and disinfectant? Because then it will cover a variety of different brushes, bristles, natural materials.
Is it the manufacturer's guidelines for the brush?
Yes. Like, there's just an idea to throw it out there because there's so many different types of brushes.
Right.
Plastic, hair. So if we told them to follow the manufacturer guidelines for sanitation or disinfectant, it would clump that little section together and tell them specifically how to disinfect that type of material. It's just an idea.
Okay.
Okay.
I still see some hands up, but I'm not sure if those are people I already called on. Paul, did you have another comment?
Yes, I was going
Right.
to riff on the prior comment about the hairbrushes. I totally understand and accept this objection. That language would have to be specific to hairbrushes because there's brushes and there's brushes. Back in 2001, when we were trying to figure out how to disinfect nail files, we did a deep dive on the use and not proper use of EPA registered disinfectants. Simple version is you cannot use them on anything porous. So a hard bristle hairbrush, where there's space between the bristles and all that, and the bristles are hard and synthetic, would not qualify as porous. So you could put that in the barbicide, which people do. But the brushes that are used to apply nail products, for instance, or many other brushes out there, they're tight, bunched bristles like a paintbrush. That's porous. That is going to retain disinfectant. So it should be very clear that the EPA disinfectants go on non-porous materials, such as hair brushes and combs and nail salon tools. Well, this line is brushes only, so we should just confine it to brushes. Because one kind you really should be using the EPA disinfectants on, and one kind you cannot legally use EPA disinfectants on. So I agree there's some more clarifying language needed, and I'll think about it more before I chime in again.
Great, thanks, Paul. And I am looking to see if there are any more comments. I'm not seeing any more comments from the committee. What we would need is a motion. If the committee agrees, I would recommend a motion, and I will call on our legal counsel, Sabina, to correct me if you think this is not acceptable. But my recommended motion would be to approve the proposed health and safety regulations to be submitted to the board with the caveat that section 986 be revised to address brushes by types. What do you think, Sabina?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to think of if we can word that a little better. If that was the only potential suggested amendment, then that should be okay. No, as long as the committee understands and knows that once it is referred to the board, if they choose not to do that, that's going to be into their purview. And that they can obviously take a recommendation from the committee, but that's not something that's set in stone yet. Is that, as long as that's understood, then they can make those recommendations. and the board will do what it would please with those.
Okay. So then I would ask if anyone is willing to so move that motion.
This is Jackie. I so move that motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Great. Thank you so much. I believe that was Reese.
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, we will open this up for public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, we have a request from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Thank you. Okay, section number 978, minimum equipment and supplies. In section number B2, you'll probably need to call out an industry bulletin to outline what materials you're actually looking for SDS. If it's every physical, chemical, powder, skincare, moisturizer, serum, and all that stuff, we probably will push back and want clarification on that. On section number 979, so D, all infected tools shall be closed in a clean covered place. The word place is extremely vague, and so that might need to be tightened up a little tiny bit. And in section number E, right below that, tweezer cases are something that you'll probably need to consider because of the lash artists in the industry like to keep them in a really fancy leather case. Section number 986, I agree with Paul completely because we don't want to have facial brushes on somebody's skin that's been, newly exfoliated and you're brushing some sort of chemical onto their skin along with an EPA disinfectant. That will be a problem for contact dermatitis, definitely with the clients. 987, realize that most estheticians, if I speak from my classification of licensee, will place their linens inside these containers in a duffel bag or a plastic bag to carry out at the end of the day to do their laundry because we don't have it in studio typically. So that will probably need to be addressed. Section 989, number 3, it says to cut or remove skin. That section right there would disallow dermaplaning, which has now been made available to licensed estheticians to perform. Section number 8, under glue or adhesive around the eye, specifically manufactured for use around the eyes. I'm not sure what you're getting at with that comment there on section number 8. Does that mean that you're trying to disallow wig glue for lash extension work, or what's going on there? Section right below that, establishment owners, number 1. You may have to define what injection means. If you are talking about the hyaluron pen, you're probably going to have to specify that it's not
15
just
seconds.
needle injection there. And then we have in 991, we have section number 6. Any chemical or electric that causes a skin burn, that means peels, will be questioned in that section right there. And I think I got them all in.
This is Sabina. Thank you so much, Wendy. I would suggest, so as you all may or may not know, this is not the last time you're going to see these regulations. Trust me, you will see them probably more than you will want to see them after, as this process goes through. I would suggest sending those comments, I'm sure you have them written up, directly to maybe Christy for compiling for the full board so that they can take a closer look at it when they do go through it with a fine-tooth comb, as well as with the Regulations Council. So that way they have everything once the full board starts a review. That way they have all potential comments and potential problem areas at their disposal.
I don't see any other public comment. Is that correct?
That is correct. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. At this time, we will turn it over to Marcine for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Christy. Member Crabtree,
Yes.
Member Isbell,
Yes.
Member Bryson,
Yes.
Member Burr,
Yes.
Member Crossett,
Yes.
Member Hamilton,
Yes.
Member Hart,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Member Rearson,
Yes.
Member Rosti,
Yes.
Member Yoon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will move to our next agenda item. So in your packets is a very long report. This is an analysis of the board's laws and regulations regarding our administrative fine schedule. So as many of you know, we had our sunset bill go into effect January 1, SB 803. And one of the things that was part of that bill changed some language in our statute that required the board to look at our fines to determine what directly impacts consumer safety. So what we did here as staff is we went through every single fine that we have and we ranked it. I will stress that this was done by staff. So this is why we bring it to our committee, who are from various aspects of the industry and expertise for your input. So please, we are never offended by anything that you feel we have done wrong. This is based on our experience, on what we've seen and our understanding. So I just wanted to make sure everybody known that we are not offended if anybody thinks some of our rankings on risk level is completely out of touch. So feel free to chime in. We will go through these one by one. This would ultimately change our administrative fine schedule. So keeping that in mind, the reasoning behind all of this is our board does tend to issue a lot of administrative fines for a lot of different aspects in the salon. And one of the things that the legislature said was, are we really improving the safety of consumers by issuing these fines to licensees for things that might not directly impact someone's safety? For instance, we were asked how many consumers have been harmed by a clean towel not being labeled. It's just an example. So that's why we went through each of these. We wanted to explain when we find this and why it's cited. We wanted to show you what the fine schedule is currently. And we also wanted to show you the number of times we found this in the last, I think we did 6 years, keeping in mind that 2020 and 2021 have an asterisk by them because that was our COVID times. So not only were salons closed, but also our staff was not working. We included them on there just so you could see, but really we went back to 2016 just so you could get a better background of how often these violations are cited. We noted a recommended risk level. This is based on our experience of what we see and what we see in consumer harm cases. And then we provided an explanation for why we chose that risk level. So that being said, we will get started going through these. Again, I don't know that we will finish this. I don't want to keep all of our members here all day. And what we can do is get through a few at a time and then open to public comment. And that way we wouldn't want to go through so many of them and open public comment. It would work out better that we take our public comment only on a few so that they have a chance to provide their input as well, especially since this is the committee. This is where the real work is done, and this package is going to be a lot of work. So we'll see what we can get through today and how we do. So that being said, we will go ahead and start with the first one, section 7313, which is access to the establishment for inspection. We're obviously required to inspect establishments anytime businesses are providing services or during business hour. So this is when an individual physically prevents an inspector from conducting an inspection. This can happen by someone actually, it happens in various manners throughout the state. It can happen halfway through the inspection. It can happen right at the beginning of the inspection. It can be hostile. It can be, and often is hostile, somebody blocking an inspector from actually getting into their salon. And so we actually take this very seriously and we ranked this high. And one of the reasons why we ranked it so high is because what we've found is that if you're going through that much effort to prevent a health and safety inspection from being done, we question what's actually going on in that salon. So on this one, we would not recommend any changes to this. We think it is a high risk to consumers. And that being said, I would open that up for any comments from the committee on this particular violation. Jackie.
Agreed. I mean, sitting on DRC, we see this often with people not allowing our health inspectors into the establishment. The fines, how you base them from the 250 to the 5 to the 750, is that strong enough, or is that hard to change the amounts?
The changing of the fines is part of the regulations. So if we're going to be changing regulations, I assume at the end of this we will change regulations. So if this committee thinks the fines should be changed, they should discuss that now as well.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Let me just double check I think that would be acceptable through the agenda item. Sabina, do you agree?
You read my mind. I was just trying to scroll up to find the agenda in my packet. Discussing a possible action. Yes, so we have that as possible action regarding the staff's analysis. And for recommendations. So these eventually, as you know, will also go to the full board. Right. So we can discuss, we can make adjustments today, and then we can recommend to the full board whatever part you finish today. If it goes on too long and you're uncomfortable with, not having a full enough discussion, you can always recommend portions of it at a time until we can meet again.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. That's what I was just wondering as we go through each one, like if we were to discuss changing of fines, how that goes about. Okay, thank you.
All right. Is it Lorianne?
That's it.
Okay.
It's okay. Everybody calls me Lorianne or Lorianne.
Okay, yeah. I just am looking at it and realized I probably said it wrong, so I apologize. Go ahead.
No problem. In my opinion, I've been in the beauty industry for 25 years, and I'm looking at the fee or the fine, and it seems very low to me. If there was somebody that was going to stop an inspector coming into their salon, I think the fine should be extremely harsh, just because they're going to stop that person because they know that they have quite a few violations. So in my opinion, I would think that it should be $1,000 all the way across, because it's very steep. I mean, that's coming from my opinion when I've had inspectors come in and I get a little shaky going, oh my God, did I clean that properly and everything? And it's like, it's a preventative is what I would like to say.
I would agree on that, Lorianne. And my question would be, I kind of feel like I like the sense of raising it even more each one.
Yeah, okay.
Like when you're first and then second and third, just because I've seen on DRC where people will deny the first time and then our inspectors go back like a few months later, they deny again, just so that there's some repercussions financially for that. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I just feel like if it's very steep, then people will follow the rules a lot more clearly.
We can only hope.
I will go next to Brandy.
I would just want to piggyback, and I agree with Lori on the price should be, the violation charge should be more, and that the first one should be high, and then again with Jackie that it should increase from there. And I just think that this is the first fine that determines all of the others. And so if if they're interfering with the possible investigation, which is a red flag to begin with, and with the fine being so minimal on the first offense, I was on a call in October with someone who had multiple fines for refusing, and it didn't seem like really a deterrent to her until the fourth time, and now she's being suspended. And I don't know with just the fine itself if there's even other discipline that can be tagged onto that on that first offense to prevent, but definitely it should be increased, and I would say more than 1,000 as well. I don't know the parameters of how much we can determine a fine to be, but the severity of that first one being, everybody should be able to show that they're working and protecting the public safety if that's what the license is for. And if they're unable to do that, they shouldn't be licensed.
Great, thank you. Next, I will go to Brandon.
Hi, thank you, Christy. I've got a question and then I have a comment. So I read Business and Profession Code 7313, and it reads very similar to the authority given to Cal OSHA also to conduct inspections of workplaces to determine whether or not employers are providing safe and healthy workplaces. Curious though, there are times when we are told that we are not allowed to conduct an inspection, which requires us to obtain a search warrant from the Superior Court. Because they do have the ability to deny access or entry onto their, into their place of employment. So I was curious, my question is how DCA gets around that and is allowed to pose fines to employers without requiring inspectors to obtain a warrant. And that may be a question to Sabrina. My follow-up though, and I'll just make this comment, I do believe that, from my experience, employers or businesses will not allow an inspector into the workplace for fear that they're going to find things that are, obviously going to cost additional fines, and allows them an opportunity to clean up the workplace, which, in this case, this poses, potential harms to their patrons and customers because they're not following the existing rules and regulations. So, from my experience and in my opinion, the harsher the penalty, I think the better we'll have employers comply with this particular law because, penalties are essentially there to deter employers or bad actors or businesses, and so if we have a minimal fine of $250, it seems like there's many other offenses here that are much higher. It would make sense that a business owner would just, deny access and clean up the place. So I think the harsher the penalty, the more deterrence that we would have. So that was my comment.
Great, thank you. And I do think, and Sabina, you might chime in, but because we actually have statutory authority that requires our establishments to give us access, either when services are being done or when or during business hours, we have that statutory authority. And I think from what I've heard, it is different than a lot of other state agencies because we have it in statute. It prevents us from having to get the warrant.
Okay, thank you. That's terrific.
Yeah. I think Yumi, do you have a comment?
This is the moderator, Yumi. I see that you're unmuted, but unfortunately we're unable to hear you. Can you try muting and then unmuting again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I've been doing my business, salon spa business since 2002. I've been licensed a cosmetologist since 1999. I've been noticed a lot of a business owner is they working to avoid the inspection. They working or having employees working after hours. I noticed a lot, especially after COVID. So my question is how we can handle that's kind of like evade like this access. They don't have to the deny the access to the establishment, but that's kind of another way to evade that one. So do we have any measure, take action about that? And then also, I agree with the like from the begin with the like charging high fine from the begin with, so they can have a more cautions about that too. But so I had a comment and I had a question.
So I think your question kind of talks about our access to the establishments possibly outside of normal hours.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an internal process that we're looking at trying to get to those locations during those hours. We get complaints all the time of unlicensed activity happening between 5 and 8 o'clock because they think that's when we're not inspecting. So we will go out on a late inspection and try to determine that. It's just not, it's just usually complaint driven. So coming in from someone who files a complaint and lets us know what's going on.
Yeah,
And then we would go check
especially
that.
right now, it's a lot of a salon is making like a salon unit, like a Solar Salon Phoenix and the Salon Republic, and then how we can access to those type of establishment.
Right.
Then they can never get an inspection basically if they know avoid the inspection day when they heard the rumor inspector is down.
Yes. It is actually, that's a great point. It's something we deal with access on a regular basis. And a lot of times what we do find is an inspector will lock, or I'm sorry, somebody will lock their door. There's times when we're in some of the salon suite areas and everybody locks their doors. But if our inspectors can determine that they are providing services inside, they will get cited for this because you can't lock the door to try to keep the inspectors out when you're providing services. That's against our statute. So they would get fined for that.
Thank you for clarification.
Uh-huh. So what I would recommend, since it seems like there's some consensus for a higher fine amount, the one thing I wanted to bring up is that there is a maximum fine amount of $5,000 that any citation can. We can't go over $5,000 limit for citations. So I think I heard several comments about raising that first offense to 1,000. I personally totally agree with that. I would recommend we go from 1,000 to 1,250 to 1,500 as the escalating amount. And the reason why I would keep the third violation at 1,500 because we don't know what I would open that up for discussion if you think that fine amount would be acceptable. Obviously, we're not getting in there. So my concern was that we were adding additional fines, but we haven't done an inspection. So this would be standalone. So I would open it up to comments for that. That would be a suggestion. We can go higher if the committee chooses to do that. And I will go to hands raised. I think, Lorianne, I saw you raise. I can't tell if people had their hands raised or had it not raised it down. Lorianne, did you have an additional comment?
I agree with you. Those fines, to increase them, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Reese?
Yeah, is there a reason that we would only go up by the 250 in each level?
No reason at all, other than the fact that was the amount it was raised currently. So that's what I based it on.
I would actually prefer to go higher. If they're doing a second violation, it's problematic.
So would you go 1,000, 1,500 to 2,000?
That sounds better to me.
Next I have Jackie.
So, Christy, you're saying that we can only fine up to 5,000. That's for like if, say, total.
Correct.
So, gotcha. Okay. Well, I think this one should be the 1,015 and 2 because
Okay.
obviously, if they're not letting us in, we can't add any more to it.
Right. Right.
Great.
I will go to Mark.
Hi, thank you. This is my first time on this committee, so I'm maybe asking a question that everybody else is aware of the answer on. But what I'm wondering is if, say, for instance, I'm working on a client and an inspector comes in the office. I'm surprised at how many violations were given for people not being allowed access into the salon. So what I'm curious about is if I'm currently working on a client and an inspector were to come in, would I need to stop that visit for the inspection?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
You would not, especially Mark, are you our electrologist? We would not
Yes.
want to interrupt you, especially in your service. Same with aesthetics. Obviously, if someone's, one of the things we're moving to in our inspections is trying not to disturb the client. So that's what we want to do. Then we also want to take into consider services like electrology, services like lash extensions where they have sharp tools very close to your skin and your eyes and other areas. We don't want to interrupt those services. So if someone chooses to pause their service and go along with the inspection, that's totally fine. But we're really not wanting to interrupt your service by an inspection.
Okay, that's great to know because most of the electrolysis that I do is medically necessary on transgender women, and oftentimes I'm preparing them for their vaginoplasty surgery, so it's a very intimate visit, and it'd be unfortunate to have those visits um, interrupted. So thank you for that clarification. I was just surprised at how many people would not allow somebody, an inspector, into the office. That's really surprising to me.
All right. I believe Leslie is next.
Okay, so I'm not from California, so this is a big ask. But if someone has, for the first and second violation, not let you in, is there no ability on the third time to somehow shut them down temporarily till they let you in? I mean, if it's in short succession, that seems, and
Oh,
to
yes.
everybody else's point, we're just letting them keep getting away with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we often use 3 visits as our benchmark in a sense. I can tell you that if we've gone 3 times and you're not letting us in and it's a licensed establishment, we are looking to take action, like formal disciplinary action against that establishment.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? I'm looking. Mark, did you have another comment or was your hand just still raised?
Oh, it was still raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just am getting a comment from Dee Dee. She's not able to add, but so I will read her comment. The fines are not as big of a deterrent than losing their license or being on probation. Also, this can also be cited if the person has a locked cabinet and an employee doesn't have the key. So one of the things that we are, so that is true. So if you have to, a salon has to provide, thank you, Dee Dee. A salon has to provide access to all of the areas of an establishment. So if there is a locked cabinet, then that is also a violation. I personally think that we need to make the recommendation to separate those two situations. There are booth renters, obviously independent contractors in this industry, and they lock their items up when they are not working. And so I'm looking at some comments. Please, of my staff, feel free to raise your hand and chime in. I'm going to pause for a second and go to Carrie Harris, who's our Deputy Executive Officer. I believe she has a comment on what we're talking about regarding the locked cabinets. That is also not allowing us access, as well as a locked room. There's a different situation when someone is physically preventing us from doing an inspection, or from when someone can't find the key to a workstation because it's the independent contractors station. Carrie, do you have a comment on that?
I do, because we do have 904F, where the executive officer, any authorized representative of the board shall have access to and inspect all areas within an establishment, mobile unit, or school, including any room, closet, cabinet, drawer, container, or mobile or fixed storage or display unit. So if we could add a fine to that one, then maybe we could separate out the flat refusal for the 7313 and then have those other
Right.
scenarios cited under that. But we don't have a fine for that currently. We do have a fine for 904 D currently. So I'm assuming that we can add fines to anything in 904 then.
Sure. I would agree with that. So just to make sure the committee understands what that is I think when we're talking about these higher fines, I think we all are agreeing for the 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 for when a licensee, establishment owner, someone is physically preventing us from doing our job and conducting an inspection, but that we should look at establishing a separate violation for when someone has a locked cabinet that we can't get into, because those are obviously two very different situations. So does everyone on the committee agree on that aspect? I will ask you to raise your hand if you do not agree and have a comment. I see, I thought I saw some hands, but then they went away. Okay, so I think we're in agreement on this section to raise the fine significantly. And again, I don't think we're going to get through this today. So this is something that we would bring back to the committee at our next meeting to show you what we've done as staff to make sure we separate those two situations. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to our next one. The next one is 7317A, an unlicensed establishment. So this is an establishment has no establishment license, or the establishment changed ownership or moved and has not applied for or received a new establishment license. So we often find somebody who has opened a new business, maybe closed down a different location, and they've just carried their license over, which is not allowed. Establishment licenses are not transferable. More so, we find that this is a completely unlicensed establishment, and that's where we have a serious concern. In our citation and fine process, the inspectors go and do an inspection, and then that inspection report comes to our office. And then it goes through the process, and then our cite and fine analysts determine if a fine is warranted or not. So if an inspector came across an establishment that moved, and they thought they could post their old establishment license, and the inspector has explained to that owner that no, you can't change, you have to get a new license for this address, and we see that they've already done it, then we're not going to issue a fine. We know that it was a mistake made by the establishment owner and they've corrected it. They've already submitted their application to get that new establishment license. So this, we're talking around about a month process, if not longer. It could be up to 6 weeks for the inspection report to come in, an establishment application to come in, and for it to be at the point where the analyst is making a decision. So the way we look at it from a staff's perspective is, if you knew you didn't apply for the establishment license when you needed to, and our inspectors usually will hand you an establishment application, and 6 weeks later you still haven't done it, well, that we have a concern with, and we're going to issue you this fine. Or if the establishment still has no establishment license whatsoever, and you still haven't applied after this amount of time, we're going to issue you a fine. So I wanted to make sure you understand that there is this little bit of wiggle room where our staff review the entire situation. And if somebody is trying to correct that mistake, because believe it or not, there are so many people out there that get a business license, that get a retail sales license, and forget to get their establishment license from the board. And get it as soon as they find out they needed it. And so we're not going to fine them $500 because for a $50 application fee that they've already corrected. So keeping that in mind. These are people who are fined who have chosen not to correct their mistake because they've had that opportunity to correct it. And so with that, we think this is a high risk because unlicensed activity is one of our biggest issues we have in this industry. Someone not licensing their salon is trying to keep them off of our radar because then our inspectors don't know it exists unless they happen to drive by. And so we consider that a high risk. And you can see from our number of times the violation is cited that we find these situations all the time. I personally think the fine amounts are acceptable, and I think this risk is a high risk. So I would open that up to any discussions with the committee. Yumi, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I think we should raise the fine for this one too, because a lot of people became, especially after COVID, became a mobile. I mean, like mobile unit we are talking about from the state board is very different, but
Right.
they think they are mobile. And I'm a school instructor as well too, and then so many students ask about what is a mobile unit, and then the people just working as a mobile. So you mentioned is that this applies to the people didn't apply or couldn't apply the establishment license by mistake. But what about the people doing on purpose, like a garage salon people?
Yes, this would apply to them as well if we were to find that. So that's definitely something that the committee should talk about if they feel this amount should be raised. Brandy.
I would want to agree with Yumi as well, to increase that fine specifically for those alleged mobile establishments. I myself work at a school, as Yumi does, and understand that, especially since COVID, there's kind of been a crossover with lash tech and gel-X nail artists and unlicensed individuals altogether, or licensees attending school to receive the shortest amount of time of license, for example, a manicuring license, only to go then practice other services. I am not familiar if the board has a task force that manages online traffic. You mentioned the comment of driving by and seeing that, but the new drive-by would be checking Instagram business accounts or alleged business accounts. And for sure, if they are willfully and understanding and knowingly operating services without a license or performing services that are outside the scope of practice intentionally, then I would feel that the fine should be higher, just the same as refusing an inspection, because the risk is high and likely they are not performing services legally that are harmful, and that is why they are not licensing themselves. So I would agree that it should be higher to begin with to try to eliminate some of that. And also looking at the numbers of how many we've had in previous years versus the refusal numbers, it seems like a big problem. So perhaps that increase in that would help prevent that problem.
Awesome, thank you. Looking for hands up of any other committee members. I'm here. Oh, Jackie.
So should we start that out? What do you guys think? Like 750 and then go up each one, or should we start out 1,000? What would be a recommendation for that, everybody?
Yumi, go ahead.
I'm gonna start from 1,000. If I'm sharing the one story from the from the real people, one of the person I know, she's been licensed for over 30 years. She had a garage salon for over 30 years. She never got an inspection. Okay, and then the person I know, she created so many problem, endangers the public health and safety. But she's not the only one I've witnessed this. So we have to, from the beginning, starting from high bid, and then maybe we have to go for even higher than the second time and third time. So they should get prepared what they're gonna pay for.
Yumi, you know that, and maybe you already know this, you can also send it to the board a direct complaint if you see unlicensed establishments, just because obviously the board doesn't know sometimes. So if they're informed, it helps.
Yes, I know I reported it too, but she didn't get any inspection. She avoided it. So they know the rules and regulations, maybe much more than we do, because they need to avoid.
Yeah. Okay, so I would question or recommend to the committee, do you feel this should be at the same amount as the refusal for the 1,000 for the first offense, 1,500 and up to 2,000?
I'm good with that.
This is Reese. I'm
Yes.
also agree. The whole point of what we do is licensing. So if they're not licensed, that's a problem. So yes.
All right. I'm not seeing or hearing any objections to that. So I think we will stick with that and move on to our next item. So we have 7317, which is our unlicensed section, separated into different sections, which we'll go through. And I think if we could get through 7317, then we could open it after that. It is a few more. And then after that, we can open for public comment. 7317B, which is an unlicensed individual. This is, in my opinion, our worst fine we have. So I'm gonna probably think, knowing that how you all are going, that these are going to be raised. This is a person who is unlicensed and performing services, and our inspector has actually seen them performing services. And so that is where this is somebody who has not been in school or potentially still in school but working in a salon, and they should not be. But this is a person who is performing services. We think this is one of the highest risks we have. I will open this up for discussion. I will go to Jackie.
Hi. So again, sitting on DRC, plus, I've been in the industry myself doing hair for 33 years. I was amazed getting on the board of how much unlicensed individual activity. We definitely need to raise that to, starting at 1,000 and 15 and then up to 2,000. What I will say though about the expired establishment license and the expired individual license, that I think personally is sometimes people just overlook that they forgot to renew their license, or they moved, or So I think we could be a little not so harsh personally on those two. If we can get them to, you know, go and renew their license, but definitely we need to hire the fine amount on the unlicensed activity.
I will make a note that this is also cited and quite often cited to an apprentice who has been left alone and is providing services. Apprentices must be supervised at all times, or their license that they have is sorry, I just got distracted. That's the problem with online meetings. An apprentice who's performing a services without their trainer present is considered unlicensed as well. They should not be performing services without a trainer. So unfortunately, we find that as well. And again, it's a person who shouldn't be performing on their own. So I just wanted to bring that up, that this specific, the 7317B is also pertaining to that issue. Next, we'll go to Yumi.
So I can see that we're starting from the highest fine from this one. Actually, I live in Koreatown. In Koreatown, most of a barber shop, even owner establishment and the older employees, most of them, they are not even licensed. And then they don't even bother to get a license because they can just share the information, the inspector in town, and then they close, or they just have their employee just take a rest for the day. So I think this one is not only the fine, but it's supposed to be is more disciplinary action from the begin with. So like if there's a second offense, first time you might forget, second time and then kind of started to get suspicious. Third time, obviously they don't have any intention to get a license.
Right.
So I think it should be like go to the disciplinary action. For example, they're not qualified, take a state board exam or whatever stuff. So they know that it's gonna be a very serious disciplinary action if they're violated.
I would totally agree with you. The problem on that is, and Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, for an unlicensed person, we could take disciplinary action against the salon owner if they're working in a licensed establishment. That's a violation that's going to be coming up here in a few more. But when we are citing an individual for unlicensed activity, we don't have anything to take action against because our board takes action against their license. So there's nothing for us to take away. What we do is we will turn them into collections. We will turn them over to the franchise tax board if they don't pay their fines. And Carrie, is that correct?
That's correct. And then we can also send them to the Division of Investigation to be cited with a misdemeanor.
Right.
But we do not, you're correct. We don't have anything to discipline if they don't have a license.
And if we are able to get if we have our Division of Investigation, those are sworn peace officers. So they would actually go issue a misdemeanor citation that would then go to their county's district attorney's office for prosecuting that case. So there are some steps we can take, but it's not, the board wouldn't take disciplinary action over it. So that's why probably the higher fines I would recommend. I mean, I would agree with the 1,000 up to the 1,500 next and the 2,000 next. Brandy.
Is there a clause? I agree with the pricing or the fine amount of 1,000, 15, 2,000. Is there any clause to potentially protect the apprentice, or is it just the fact that they understand that as an apprentice they have to have someone supervising them, that they are in violation when they are knowingly practicing services and the supervisor is not present? I'm okay. So I just wanted to make sure for that. I just hope that they're aware of what the consequence is for them. Because yes, they shouldn't be working unlicensed and they shouldn't be working unsupervised. And again, if the fine is large enough, hopefully that will then incentivize them to become licensed or do what they, or stop practicing.
Yes. And just a quick little side note is that we are working on a separate regulation issue for the apprentice program because we are finding so many issues with this. It's something we're looking at as well to try to strengthen that. But they're well aware, unfortunately. And most times the apprentice will appeal that and go before the disciplinary review committee, who does have the authority to modify that fine, because obviously that's a huge fine for an apprentice who's trying to gain their license and is sometimes potentially taken advantage of in a situation. So I can tell you that our DRC usually takes that into consideration as well.
I'm just going to piggyback on that because that is true. I mean, sometimes the apprentice, when they've came in to, discuss this fine that they've gotten, sometimes honestly aren't aware of it and are being taken advantage of, unfortunately. But there needs to be a price to pay, in my opinion, for this.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our next section, which is, as Jackie mentioned, this is our expired establishment license. You can see how often we cite this. We have ranked this as a low to medium risk because it is often a mistake. It is often that someone has just forgotten to renew their establishment license. So. Most of the times when this is cited, the owners are taking care of that right away. And so that's why we have that risk is low. I would agree with Jackie. I think these fines actually might be a little bit high. If they don't renew that license, we're going to go back out and inspect again. So keep that in mind as well. But I would open that up for discussion on what you think of this situation. Jackie.
Sorry, I just keep chiming in on everything. I think we could lower this just because I do think a lot of times it is just they forgot. I mean, we could start with a little bit lower on the first offense, and then they're, oh, okay, shoot, and then they go and renew it. Obviously, if they don't, then we can do a higher jump if you want to the next one. But I would take it that generally it's just they forgot.
Right.
Am I correct in that?
You are, and you can see that we do have a pretty significant jump to that third offense. It's $500, and the second offense is $300. Because the renewal, if it's not, well, it's delinquent, so it's going to have a delinquency fee. So you're looking at about $75 if it's within their 2-year delinquency term. And it usually is. Sometimes we find them that might be delinquent for 3 or 4 years. I think it's more common to find them they've just forgotten and they have to pay the $75 to renew. And so I'm not sure what you would want to set that first offense at, $250. I would maybe lower that to 100 is my recommendation.
That's what I was thinking too. Start at 100 and then go up more.
My recommendation is to only change the first offense to 100 and then it increases by $200 every time. I think that's a good deterrent. We're talking again, we're talking a $75 renewal fee, possibly $150, I believe, if they had let it go for longer than 2 years. That would be a recommendation I have. I'm looking for any hands that might be raised.
Agreed.
Okay. And I'm just being corrected by my staff, as they always will for me. Delinquent establishment is $60. So someone who expired, 22 months ago only needs to pay $60 to renew their establishment license. So they should do that. If they're not doing that, that's a red flag to me. Any comments? Anyone who doesn't agree with that direction? Right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next section. And that is 7317D. That's an expired individual license. So we ranked this as a medium risk. Again, it can sometimes be a mistake, but this is your personal license. This is what everybody went to school for, and what gives you the right to practice in this industry. So again, if somebody has forgotten to renew their license and they renew it right away when the inspector comes in, we're not going to issue that citation. So these are individuals who have not renewed their individual license and who are working with that expired license. We ranked that as a medium risk because that's an individual. This, again, it could be a license that's been expired for 6 years and they still haven't ever renewed it, which of course would then make them have to go back to take the test. It's after 5 years you have to take the test again. So it could range in any of those areas, but an individual licensee who has worked that hard to get that license in the first place, I think needs to be held to a higher standard for renewing that individual license. Again, if they renew that license right away, we're not going to be issuing them that citation. So I would open this up for discussion. And if no one has any comments, we're going to assume that that thinks you agree with how it is today. All right, I like it. I don't see any comments. We are going to move on. 7317E is an individual working in an established license. So this is a person who is fully licensed individual, but their salon owner forgot to renew their license, or for whatever reason, it's an expired establishment. So it goes back to the owner probably forgot. Now, it is an individual's responsibility to make sure that they are working within a licensed establishment, but this is often not within their control. So that is why we have the risk at low medium, and the fines you can see start out at only $25 and go up to $100. I personally think this is an acceptable risk level, and I think it's an acceptable fine level. But I would certainly open it up to any comments if someone does not agree. Seeing no comments, we have one more left in our 7317 series. The next one is an individual working in a completely unlicensed establishment. So this is not, I forgot to renew my license. This is a completely unlicensed establishment. We raised this risk level a little bit higher to the medium. You can see the fines are considerably higher. Again, this is somebody who could potentially be working in an establishment that's trying to stay off the board's radar. Trying to not get that inspection whatsoever. So we look at that as being a little bit riskier to a consumer than someone who has just simply forgotten to renew their establishment license. So I kind of agree with what it's set at now, but I would open that up for any comments. Okay, I'm seeing no comments on this. At this time, I think we should pause and take public comment on anything that we have discussed so far, just so we can get our public's input on these specific violations. So we will go ahead and open it up to public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And it looks like we have a request from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Woo, that's a lot. All right. 7313. there needs to be a mechanism for solo estheticians, and I thank Mark Ryerson for bringing up these intimate services. We often have a situation where we're doing a Brazilian, and we need to know what the mechanism is going to be to satisfy an inspector, and versus us being evading. Estheticians are very typically on our own, so we don't have a receptionist to intercept this transaction. 7317, working from garage salons and things like that, monitoring social media accounts. From the aesthetic perspective, we see it a lot with lash artists. We really don't even feel that anybody is being penalized. And so where we're being held accountable and maybe not able to open the door for an inspector, it seems like there needs to be a lot more going on with inspections with these accounts that are advertising all over social media. This includes tattoo artists that are now doing lash lifts and brow laminations and moving into our territory. And I'm going to go on to 7317C and D. That's the expired establishment license and individuals. I think if this comes to pass in the times that we're still under the COVID waivers of our fees being waived, it is going to be a little confusing. But if indeed these changes take place in another year or two, you should be out of the woods with that. 7317, individual working in an expired establishment. We have situations where licensed estheticians are, and everybody else are in lease situations. So are you expecting us to break our lease somehow in order to get away from an unresponsible establishment owner? That seems like a tough situation to put us as licensees into. So we can't break a lease just because we have a situation with an irresponsible establishment license holder. And then 7317F, you'll note that a lot of med spas are probably on your list of places that don't have an establishment license in place. So are you going to cite a licensed esthetician that is just trying to keep her job with a doctor who doesn't have an establishment license in place? It seems a little bit unfair to the licensed esthetician in that situation, because we do get kind of pushed into those places where we need to keep our jobs and not push back with an owner like a doctor. So please, when you're making these rules, make sure that you understand that licensed estheticians do have kind of a unique place in the industry. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. I do not see any further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, we are going to move on to our next item, which is a biggie. And I have a feeling I know what you're all going to say. The next one is 7320, practice of medicine. So I do think we should talk about when we cite this. An inspector might find evidence of the practice of medicine, and SB 803 did make a change recently that says you cannot offer a service that's the practice of medicine. So this means if we see a window advertising that says mole removal, we can cite them. So even if we're finding something that is not, we don't actually see somebody performing this service, if they're offering a service that's been deemed practice of medicine, then we will cite for that type of activity. We obviously feel this is of the highest risk, and we have that set at $1,000 all the way across the first and second, third offense. So I will open it up for any comments. Jackie.
We need to raise it 1 and then 15 and then 2.
I think it's important to mention that by the time we got to a third offense, we have this person who has been cited has had the opportunity to go through the disciplinary review process, and they've deemed it being practice of medicine. A person who has gone through that and then still even has the option to go straight to the administrative law judge. So I think it's important that we keep in mind that getting to that third offense is a lot. It's several inspections, it's several opportunities for hearings as well. Brandon.
Got a question.
Yes.
So I'm not real familiar with the penalty structure for this particular industry. Is it set individually based on the number of offenses, or has it been considered to just have one regulation as it relates to the penalty amounts to increase based on a percentage for the second offense and then the same for the third offense? So for example, if you were to set offense number one at $1,000, and then if we had a repeat offense within, I don't know, 5-year time frame after going through that appeals process, then it would just increase by 25%, let's say, or even 50%, and the third offense would increase by maybe 100% of the initial assessment. I don't know if that's been considered, but it may make it easier for industry to be able to know the penalty amounts, because it's based on a structure across the board rather than each individual section. So anyways, I was just wondering if that had been considered. It also
It has not. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, because it may make it, I mean, that's what Cal OSHA does. We have a 25% assessment, and then it goes up for the third offense within a statutory time frame, because there's a period of time which people can then have their violations fall off. But yeah, then that third offense is a multiplier as well. So then that way it's just kind of we would just set the initial penalty amount instead of having to contemplate what a second or even third offense would be. So I wanted to throw that out there.
I've been with the board for about 16, 17 years, and no one's ever brought that up, and I think it's a great idea. This board, I will say that in the past, many years ago, the board had escalating offenses like this, and the legislature came back and said, we don't think this is working as a deterrent. Please change your process. The board then went to a single fine, and they were low, and then the legislature said, well, your fines are too low, it's still not a deterrent. So the board went back to an escalating fine structure. But I would like to hear anyone else's comments about doing coming up with that formula of saying, the first offense is, so Brandon, would it be your first offense is X, second offense is an increase of 25%, third increase is an increase of 50%?
Or even 100% of the initial fee. Yeah, I mean, so
Okay.
If it was $1,000, I don't know if 25%, based on what I'm hearing from the committee members, if 25% is even enough. Maybe it's 50%. So the second fine is $1,500, and then the third fine is just $2,000 because it's 100% for the third violation. And so then, as a committee, we would just set the offenses for the first offense based on the risk, and then from there it would just be a multiplier. So that way, as a committee, or even when this gets sent to the board for consideration, they're not having to really spend as much time contemplating second offenses and third offenses, because there's just one regulation that's being proposed with these multipliers as it applies across the board for all of these regulations.
That's smart.
Why have we not thought of that? I think that's a great recommendation. Carrie, do you have any comment on that, just from your experience? Carrie's our Deputy Executive Officer, again, Carrie Harris, and she works a lot more in depth on this, so I'm curious of her input on this.
I think that's a great idea, as long as everybody agreed. And
Okay.
It would make things very uniform as far
Right.
as, the fine schedule goes. Because right now, like we had one that was, we were going to move down to 100 and then 300 and then 500. So that's a $200 increase, where all the other
Right.
ones we were talking about today are $500 increases. But if we had some sort of formula that was uniform, that would
Right.
make it fair across all of the fine schedules. I was just running a report to see how many times we've cited somebody that $5,000 in the last so many years, because you were talking earlier about how $5,000 was the limit for any citation, no matter how many fines you got. We can't fine over $5,000. So I just kind of wondering how these increased fines were going to affect that number, but we've only cited that only got to $5,000 like 3 times in the last few years. So
And that's a departmental cap, I believe. I believe that's a general statute that requires that $5,000 limit. And one of the reasons that I would guess we've gone over that limit is because when we find dirty foot spas, we cite them per chair. And that did go up to 5,000. I will tell you all what we do when that situation does occur. We cap it at 5,000, but we do let the licensee know what their violations could have been, and so they know that the difference. But going back to Brandon's recommendation, does anyone have any input on that or questions? What we could do, if we all agree on that, is kind of not talk more about the fines, and at our next meeting, staff can bring back an updated report that would show what that would look like for fines. Mark, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. So I was just thinking about some of those numbers. So on those small fines, I like Brandon's idea is really brilliant, but I was thinking about, like, on small fines, let's say you've got a $25 fine and you increase it by 50% and then 100%. That is not much of an increase. However, if you go to a fine that starts at 1,000 and you increase it by 500 and then up to 2,000, I think it may need to be fines over a certain threshold would work really great with that percentage multiplier. The ones that are the smaller fines may not provide the percentage won't make the increase big enough to make a difference, is my thought.
I agree. And I think that's something we can look at, as well as we go through this document. We're going to start seeing some of those lower fines with a very low risk, and I'm going to be asking the committee if they think those should still be fines at all. Because again, going back to our sole purpose of this report is to really look at what violations constitute consumer harm. So we need to keep that in mind as well, other than just talking about the fines. And I still think we could come back to the committee with a fine structure to show the formulas and determine, so you could see in front of you what that would look like if we implemented something like this. Jackie.
I was just going to say what you said in a sense, obviously, but not as much knowledge as you have. But I agree. I mean, if we start at 1,000 and it goes 50%, we're like Brandon had said, because the offenses that are not as high in cost usually are low risk. So I think it just would make it very easy and uniform, just to make sense of it all. If everybody else was good with that, I think it's really smart. And then, yeah.
So maybe as we continue to go through these violations, we look at just the first offense. And then you let us bring back to this committee what that would look like in that structure. Mark, did you have another comment, or is your hand still up? All right, great. I can't remember if we finished with practice of medicine. I believe we did.
We did.
Okay. Okay, moving on to our next section of 7320.1, which is use of an illegal metal tool. And this is a violation is rarely cited because we have another regulation section that is more specific to finding an illegal tool. And that usually is a credo blade or a needle that's set in regulation. So that's why you're seeing those low numbers. However, the risk is still very high. If we were to find these tools. And obviously a statute is a lot harder to change than a regulation. So this statute gives us the authority to have that regulation and have that fine. It's an interesting situation that this puts us in. I don't personally think we need we should be fining for 7320.1 because we cite for it under regulations. My recommendation would be to not have a fine for 7320.1 because we have the authority to do that under a regulation, and we're never going to cite somebody twice for the same thing. So that is my input. I will open it to Jackie.
Just so I'm clear, so when we go in, I know we've seen this when we've gone in and people are doing Botox, which they shouldn't, and thus we have needles. So you're saying under that other regulation, it already covers that?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no more comments on this section. We will go ahead and move on to 7320.2, illegal treatment methods. This is a high risk. However, it's not one that we've ever found. This section is commonly referred to as an X-ray device, which we never really find. So I would probably recommend that this one remain, only because with a changing industry that we have, you never know if it will raise its ugly head again. We would consider this a very high risk. Okay, seeing no comments on that, we'll go ahead and move on to our next section. This is 7336, no supervision of an apprentice. So this is when an inspector finds an apprentice providing services and their approved trainer is not directly supervising the apprentice. We consider this a high risk. And I'm just going to call on some of my staff right now to tell us who actually gets this violation if no one is supervising the apprentice. Carrie, are you there?
So 7336 is cited to the individual licensee.
So the trainer.
The apprentice who's performing the service. And because the trainer's not there.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Yes.
So this is a citation to the apprentice because they're not being supervised.
They would be cited for unlicensed activity and for providing services without a supervision.
I will go to Brandy.
I understand that the person or that's supposed to be supervising them is not present. However, isn't it on record who their supervisor should be with the board?
Yes.
And so would we still be able to find them? I believe, in my opinion, the original fine from, I think it was 7313 or 7317B already addresses the fine for working as an unlicensed person in terms of the apprentice, which you had discussed that they tend to appeal. But I believe that the supervisor, I would assume, would know that that person is there working, or at least be monitoring their salon or barbershop space to prevent that, and that fine should fall on them and not the apprentice, as the apprentice is already fined for working without a license.
So in theory, I 100% agree with you, but we can't cite someone who is not present. You know, it's almost like you getting a speeding ticket when you weren't driving your car. So we cannot legally cite somebody who's not present, because that trainer can easily just say, my apprentice shouldn't have been working without me. And there would,
right.
You know, so we can't cite anyone, even an individual licensee who might have had a violation at their station. We can't cite you unless you're there.
I see. Okay.
Any other comments on this violation? And do we agree with the starting fine of $100?
Are we gonna do this increase like Brandon was saying on all of our?
I think we should start with that. I think we'll be able to see it better in our next meeting. So I think we should at least start with that.
I agree.
Okay. Brandy, did you have another comment?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right, moving on to 7348, no licensee in charge of an establishment. This is an interesting violation that you can see we cite quite a bit. If you look back to 2016, it was 601 times we found this. We have this section of law states that a salon, an establishment, shall at all times be in the charge of a person who is licensed. That can be your establishment owner, because they would be a licensee in charge. It can be any manicurist you want. It can be any cosmetologist you want, but somebody has to be in charge. Now, when we look at our traditional employer-employee-based salons, they usually have managers, so it's not an issue. If we go into a booth renter salon, no one is usually in charge of that. And so we tend to not have anyone that's willing to take responsibility for this situation. What we try to explain even during the inspections is that what we want the licensee in charge to do is to look at the inspection report when the inspector is finished. So we want somebody there who's willing to take responsibility to go over the inspection. And every salon, every business licensed salon is required to have this person. The problem is a lot of people don't understand this, and they think that by them saying they're in charge, that they're going to be solely held responsible for anything that is found in the establishment, which is not the case. The establishment owner is going to be cited because we will cite the business license. So it is a very confusing, I think, to a lot of our licensees. Most of the time when we don't have a person in charge, it's because there's lots of licensees and we've made sure they're all actual licensees, but they don't want to they feel it's an added responsibility. So it is confusing to some of our licensees. That being said, we've put this at a medium risk because we want somebody there who is licensed, who has learned the laws and regulations of the industry to protect consumers. So we think it's an important section, and we think it's a significant fine. We think the fine is set. I think the fine amount is acceptable, and we put this at a medium risk because, again, it's often just a miscommunication for when we cite this. And I would open that up for any comments on that, or any comments on that starting $100 violation. Okay, I see no comments. We will move on to the next one, and that is 7349, employing an unlicensed person. that is a violation that goes to the establishment, and that is when you have working in your salon somebody that absolutely has no license, not a person with an expired license, but somebody who has not gone to school or who might be in school, but somebody who has never been tested to receive their license. We think this is one of our highest risks. And I would open that up for any comments. It's starting at $1,000. Jackie.
I'll just, as long as we can raise it each time, because
Yep.
we see this happen so much.
All right, I think this might be, let's do the rest of the 7349s and then we will pause for public comment. The next one is employing an unlicensed person with an expired license. So it's somebody who has often just forgotten to renew their license. Looking at the number of times this violation has been cited per year, I'm thinking 2021 might be an error in the data. So we'll double check that data. And as most of us know, the governor has waived the fees, so it could have something to do with our data systems, is why that is so high. We tend to look more at our older years. And so with that being said, again, it's that situation where there's an expired license. If they've forgotten and they immediately renew that license, they're not going to receive a citation. So these fines are set for people who are unlicensed, who are continuing to work. So I would open that. Again, we put it as minimum risk because they did have a license at one time, so they do know the health and safety laws. But for some reason, they're choosing not to renew their license. So I will open that up and I will go to Reese.
Yeah, I'm noticing that the 2021 number is the same for above with 7349. So perhaps it's just a translated number.
Yes, we'll look to see what we have there and what happened. All right, I see no other comments. Carrie, did you have a comment?
I was just looking up what that number should be. And it should be for 73. Oh, expired. I'll get back to you. It's really small.
Sounds good. I thought so. I thought that that doesn't.
Expired individual license should be 73. Nope, 7349. Sorry.
Okay, we'll just go ahead and move on to our last of 7349.1, and that is the illegal use of a barber pole. This is when an inspector finds a barber pole where there is not a barber employed in the establishment. And this, of course, has been a regulation or a statute that's been with us for a very long time. The barber pole is definitely a significant indicator of the barber industry. However, at the end of the day, that doesn't pose any consumer harm. So we did rate this at a low level. And I would open this up for any discussion. Reese, did you have a comment on this one? I wasn't sure if your hand was still up. Oh,
sorry, I've taken it down.
That's okay. Any comments on the barber pole? And I would ask, go ahead.
Why do we still have it?
I think it's just been a very long history of barbers wanting us to maintain and that symbol. It's very hard for us to cite. There are so many crossover licensees now that are both barber and cosmetologist that it's almost impossible for us to determine, and really all establishment has to say is that They have a barber employed with them. There's no way we can even verify that. And so I personally don't think this should be part of our violations. I understand the importance of the barber pole. However, it's not a consumer safety issue that the board should be charged with. But I know it can be a touchy subject for some, so I open it up for discussion. All right, seeing no comments, I think at this time we take a pause and open it up for public comment, going back to, I believe, section 7320 to our
those
current.
numbers, Christy.
Okay, go ahead, Carrie, with your numbers.
For 7349 for an employee and unlicensed person, so somebody with an expired license, the numbers are actually 3 cited in 2020 and 45 cited in 2021. So very low.
Great.
All right, this is the moderator. At the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on these items, please go ahead and click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. And it looks like we do have a request from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Thank you. Very quickly on 7349, the word employing licensed persons is kind of problematic, considering that the majority of our industry right now is in an independent contractor situation. So is that only if they're an employee, or are you saying if a salon has a bunch of people in there that don't have a license and they're not employees, this doesn't affect them? So that word employing on 7349 is a little bit problematic. I'm going to go back a little bit to an esthetician's favorite subject of 7320, practice of medicine. I suspect that we are highly cited in this category. The BBC penalty for devices that aren't medicine. We recently went through an exercise about an ultrasonic spatula being cited as a medical device. It is something we remove cleanser with. And there's really no mechanism in this day of modern aesthetics of reviewing or affirming that a device is within the cosmetic scope of practice with the board. We realize and recognize that there are so many devices that come out on the market. How can anybody keep track of them? But we really do need a mechanism so that we aren't cited for these things that are truly in the cosmetic scope of practice. Our only opportunity for this is an inspection is taken and a report is made. Cite and Find literally Googles these things. And if somebody is a little bit beyond descriptive of what this device actually does, that will negatively impact the esthetician that knows that something as simple as a cosmetic ultrasonic spatula, ultrasound devices that work in the 10 megahertz category of things that are truly not medical in scope. We get cited for that stuff all the time, and there's no way for us to defend ourselves with that. And then if I go to 7320.1, you mentioned an X-ray device. I don't know what X-ray will ever come into our market, but 10% phenol is called out specifically there. That implies that your inspectors are now going to have field testing equipment or just relying on what it says on the outside of the bottle. That section seems a little problematic to me. And from the aesthetic standpoint, there are a lot of things that we can buy online. There are a lot of things that we can buy without a license, without a medical license online. But that section right there, that it implies that you're going to employ field testing devices and test strips and things like that. So, thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, moving on to 7350. That is the establishment residential use. This is when an inspector finds evidence of a person living in the establishment. Not to be confused with a home establishment. This is when we find people actually living inside their business location. And they do not have a direct entrance separate from the entrance in connection with the private quarters. We rated this as a low to medium risk to consumers. You can see how few times we have found this. And so I would open that up to any comments from the committee. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to 7351. That is restroom requirements. This is when an inspector finds items stored inside the public restroom and consumers have access to this item. This often involves cleaning supplies or products. We've gone into restrooms that have been used as basically product storage. And that is a safety issue. We've put it as medium. We do find it a lot. Unfortunately, a lot of salons will store cleaning products in their salons. This is a safety risk because it's a public restroom, so you could have a child in that restroom. Keeping in mind that salons that have restrooms located as or noted as employees only, that is different. So this is for the restrooms that are for the public. So we don't want a bottle of bleach being out on a counter or under a sink with access to perhaps a young child that might be using that restroom. The first offense is $50, and we've ranked this as a medium risk. Any comments from our committee? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. No soap or towels or air hand dryer or hand washing facilities. So this is obviously where someone doesn't have the capability to wash their hands. With what we've experienced in the last few years, we can imagine that this is a very important requirement. We've ranked this as a high risk to consumers. A licensee having dirty hands and then touching a client is obviously quite the risk to the consumer. I would open it up for discussion to determine if that $50 is too low. With that, I will go to Jackie.
That's what I was just going to say. We should probably raise that starting price.
What do you think about 100?
Fantastic.
Okay, any other comments from the committee? All right, seeing no more comments, we'll go ahead and move on. Section 7353.4 is a labor rights notice. An inspector, we are required, salons are required to have certain labor information posted. This section of law is not that old. We are required to look for this labor information to be posted. So while we've ranked this as a low to medium risk to a consumer from the board's goal of consumer protection, it is valuable information to licensees that are working in the establishment. And so while it's a low to medium, it's certainly not something we would want to do away with. And I would think that the $50 violation is acceptable. I think if they don't have it posted, it is often because they are unaware of the posting. We're currently actually working on a adding some information to our inspections to make sure everyone is aware of this posting that has to be done. So we're hoping to do some education around this as well. So I think it's probably just a confusion that someone might not have this posted. Any comments from our committee on this one? All right, moving on. 7358, no licensee in charge of a mobile unit. Just as we talked about the licensee in charge of a establishment, this goes the same for a mobile unit. These are actual licensed mobile units we're talking about. You can see that we have never cited this violation. However, we have noted that the risk is medium. I think it's something that we should remain as a violation. We have never cited it because honestly, mobile units are usually owned by a licensee who are doing it. But mobile units are becoming more common, not super common, but I think looking ahead, we have to take into consideration that some mobile units could be employing other people to do their business. And I think we just want to make sure we leave this as is. I personally think the first offense is acceptable. Any other comments on this? All right, moving on to our next one. 7359, employing an unlicensed person in a mobile unit. Obviously, this would be horrible and at a very high risk. And again, we have never cited this violation. However, it's a super important violation, and more so, as I just mentioned, there's a growing popularity of mobile units. So I do think the first offense is fine, and we add it to our new fine schedule that we'll propose at the next meeting. And I don't think there should be any changes in this statute. Any comments? Seeing none, we will move on. Mobile unit residential prohibited use. This is when an inspector finds an individual living in their mobile unit. We have never found this. Most of our mobile units that we have in California are quite nice and quite not set up for living inside. However, you never know. You never know what we could experience in the future, and it's definitely something we would not want to see happen in the future. Because there's no history of this, I would recommend we leave this as is. Seeing no comments, we will move on. 7400, change of address. So every licensee is required to tell us if they've changed their address within 30 days. We obviously issue a citation for that. We have ranked this as very low. I would open this for discussion. Again, it is often forgotten. We have a very, very high volume of address changes that come into this board. We have 600,000 licensees. So we also have a high number of people who forget to change their address. If it's found during an inspection, they get a citation for that. If it is not found during a citation or during an inspection, they're not cited, they're just reminded to change their address. Most people learn about the fact that they forgot to change their address during the renewal of their license because they don't receive their license. It is a requirement that they change their address. However, it is a low risk. I don't personally think we should be fining for someone for not changing their personal address. The personal address, while it's a great way for us to communicate with licensees, if we send information out, we don't normally do that unless we have a major regulation change. I think the statute obviously changes. It's a requirement that they have to change their address. But to issue a fine to someone, I would open that up for discussion if the committee thinks we should continue to fine for a change of address. Jackie.
I'm on the fence on this one because if we don't, I don't know, just wanting to make sure that people stay up on that and not But you're right. I mean, they need to get their license, so they're gonna have to let us know. I'm open. I mean, we could put it at 25, we could put it at 0. You know more, obviously on the daily than I do, so
Mhm.
I'll go with your direction.
Any other input? Do you all agree of leaving it as it is? Unless I see a hand come up, I will assume that you are fine leaving it as is. Jackie?
I say reduce it.
Okay.
Start at
Reduce to
25 maybe.
25.
Thank you.
Anyone have any concerns with reducing it to 25? All right, seeing no hands, we'll go ahead and move on. Refusal or interference with an inspection. So this is a high-risk violation. It is often found when an individual prevents an inspector from completing their inspection. So not to be confused with stopping or not allowing the inspection and refusing access. This is when we've already started our inspection and something happens. Often people take off out the back door. That's a huge one. But even more so, we have people that hide dirty tools. It unfortunately happens quite a bit. You can see in the 16 through the 19, we're in the 400s. It's obviously been a lot less during COVID, but it's definitely something where it's a problem, in my opinion. And I'm personally okay with the first offense saying at 1,000 as if we go to the new formula of increasing. I do think it should be increased because unfortunately this happens far too much. We've had inspectors assaulted. We've had inspectors who, we have people running out the backs, hiding in salons. They will hide themselves in cabinets and offices, all kinds of crazy things that actually happen. And so it's a little ridiculous that this actually happens to our inspectors. So we do think that this is a significant risk to our consumers, because if this is how they operate with a state official, then what types of business activities are they doing when not being inspected? So we think this is a high risk, and I would agree with the 1,000 and making it increase as it goes on. Does anybody have any comments on this one?
Agreed.
All right, seeing no other comments, we will move on. 904D, no photographic identification available. This is when a licensee does not have ID to show us. So we rank this as a high risk to consumers because we are concerned about the risk of somebody using someone else's license. So it is a requirement that every licensee be able to show identification that would match their license that is hanging on the wall. And Jackie.
Christy, I think we should raise this starting at 100 just because, at DRC, we see this often. People,
yes.
Not having a license because they're using somebody else's license, blah, blah, blah. So I think,
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Going next to Brandy.
Sorry, I'm trying to think of my words I wanted to say. I'm previously licensed in another state where your picture is on your license. So when I came here, I did have my picture on my license, for that temporary probationary period. Is there a reason why we cannot just move forward with having the picture on the license? But I think most consumers are not aware that they can request someone's ID to prove that that person is themselves, and that is why you probably don't get that issue as often unless someone's reporting them. But I just think the picture should be on there permanently.
Again, I would agree with you. We don't put that picture on there because currently our database does not have a way to store those pictures and reprint them onto a renewal. It's always something on the backs of our minds that we would love to see happen, and something we would look into, because that would obviously be the best case scenario. But at this time, our database just is not able to do it. Those first licenses are issued by our computer-based testing vendor, who takes the picture and stores it in their database, but our databases don't talk to each other when it comes to pictures. So unfortunately, we don't have that yet. But it's definitely something we are looking into in the future that we would like to be able to have.
Is there a way, so what we did when I was in Nevada, this was over a decade ago, however, licensees are responsible for bringing their own picture. We took a passport photo and they just went and we take it in and they just sealed it directly to our license. So it was really more on our end, not a database, but just to put it on the licensee to take care of it, as a suggestion or a thought.
Yeah.
In how it happens.
I hear you. I think we need to come up with some mechanism to make that happen.
That was all.
Thanks. All right, seeing no other comments, we will move on to section 905, consumer information not posted. We rank this as a high risk. This is the consumer sign that provides the 800 number and how to file a complaint with the board. We think this is super important. We've come very far with this sign. It used to be all the laws, all the health and safety laws had to be posted, and now it's just a regular size paper that just is the consumer notice. So we think it's super important, super high risk. I would even consider raising that $50 fine because again, we're consumer protection, and this is the sign that allows a consumer to know, because so many do not know where to file a complaint. So I would open that up for discussion to the committee.
I say raise it.
Would anyone have any heartburn with raising that to $100? And as a just so you know, we provide this sign at every Carrie, I believe it's provided every time the license is renewed. So not only do they get it with the first license, they get it every 2 years, and it's available on our website for them to download at any time. All right, seeing no other comments, we'll go ahead and move on. Section 920, I'll give Carrie a heads up that the apprentice ones are very interesting. I might need help with these. Apprentice training records not available or incomplete. So this is when an inspector goes in and finds that the apprentice was present, but they are unable to provide their training records. And Carrie, can you clarify who gets this violation?
The trainer gets that violation only
Okay.
the trainer.
Okay, so this goes to the licensee who has agreed to be a trainer, and they sign off on the application for doing this, and they are supposed to be keeping records of the apprentice training. So this is if during an inspection we find that they do not have this information. I think we've rated it as medium high because the apprentice program is of concern. Are they really getting the training would be the reason why we ranked that there. I personally think that the first offense of $100 is acceptable. Any comments on this violation? All right, we're going to move on to 965, display of license. We have noted this as a high risk. This is what you licensees have worked for, and it should be posted for a consumer to see. The first offense is $50. I think we could debate on or discuss if that's should be increased, but this is having your license posted so that the consumer can see it. Any input on any changes that you would see made to that? I think it's probably a violation that is, I think it's probably okay. I think that they learn quickly to post their license. Okay, I see no comments on that. We'll go ahead and move forward. The next section has all kinds of letters and numbers next to it, 978. This is pertaining to receptacles, cabinets, and containers. So this is when an inspector finds that an establishment does not have the minimum equipment, such as a covered waste container for hair, closed containers for soiled linens, closed containers for to store the clean tools and linens, proper containers for disinfectant solution, and their mixed disinfectant. Again, this is regarding containers. The first offense is $50. We've ranked this to low or medium, and the reason why we feel it's low or medium is because this is the containers we're talking about, not the actual act of disinfecting. Any comments on this section? Okay, we'll move on to section 978A5. This is a little more severe. This is insufficient disinfectant for total immersion. You can see how high the number of times we find this violation are. We have ranked this as high. This is often found with a comb in a disinfectant jar that is only half submerged, and is found every single day, everywhere in California. I would think the $100 is sufficient, but would welcome any comments on this section. Okay, seeing no comments, we're going to keep on going. (978A6), no steam or dry heat sterilizer for electrology tools. So this is specific to electrologists. And when we've gone in and done the inspection where this type of equipment is not found, you can see that we have found it once, but it is often not found. We are super happy. Our electrologists usually follow these rules on doing their sterilization properly. I would think the violation of $500 is acceptable, but would welcome any comments.
As an electrologist, I would think that it seems totally appropriate.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, moving on to 978B, no disinfectant solution available for use. So this is obviously ranked high. This is where we find absolutely no disinfectant in the establishment whatsoever. It currently is a $250 fine for a first offense. Leslie.
Well, looking at 978 right above it, the no steam or dry heat, which is a $500 fine, it's really an equal offense, right? I mean, not being able to properly make things safe, right? It's just a different category. So I think that fine could go up a little bit to start with.
All right.
Agree.
Anyone have, okay. So moving that up to 500 to match with the previous violation. I apologize for the motorcycle that just went by my window.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. I mean, to me, it's an equal offense, right? I mean, in terms of being able to harm somebody.
All right, seeing no comments on that. I agree with that as well. We will move on. Section 978C, no manufacturer labeled container for disinfectant. So this we have ranked as high. This is when the inspectors find that there is no labeled container. We feel that this is a high risk because the manufacturer's label contains the important information for how to use the disinfectant. And when we find it completely missing, we tend to have concerns with that. And we have a concern with that based on the fact that they might be reusing that disinfectant, or it might not be disinfectant at all that we've found in the establishment. We consider this a high risk. And the first offense is at 250. Mark.
Similar to the last person's comment, this seems like it should be at the same levels that the last two items were at.
Anyone have any concerns with moving that to 500? Okay, we're going to move on. 979, and we will do 979 and then we will do public comment. 979 is the act of disinfecting non-electrical tools. It's obviously high risk. You can see our volume of times we find this. It is our most, I believe it is one of our most cited violations. This is when an inspector observes a dirty tool not being disinfected properly. The disinfectant solution might not be covered, or it's dirty. Or a tool is not stored in a labeled container, or the container that is labeled clean but it's dirty. So often we'll find a drawer that's labeled clean but it has all kinds of hair and debris inside of it. So this section does cover quite a bit. I can tell you the majority of times we find this violation is a labeling issue. We will, however, cite for this issue as well if an inspector actually observes someone using a tool that is dirty on a client. So they may take a tool out of a dirty drawer, a drawer labeled dirty, and use it right on a client, unfortunately in front of the inspector. So we would find this as well. So it is at $100. I believe this is at $100, which seems sort of low, because it is predominantly a labeling issue. This is often found with it's a labeling issue. So that being said, I would open this up for any recommended changes on this. Mark, did you have your hand up for this one, or was that previously? Okay.
Sorry about that.
See, that's no problem. Seeing no comments on this, I think we should take a pause and go to public comment on these sections so far.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on these items, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, we have a request from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, I'll request to unmute your microphone. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning.
Thank you. 351 and 352. Often licensed estheticians do rent space in dental or other business, environments where there's, other types of businesses, and we don't actually have our restrooms under our control. I'm hoping that there is a mechanism or an industry bulletin that could be issued, or some sort of advisement of what we can actually have in our restrooms. So is that paper towels and toilet paper only? And also, what are you going to do to consider the fact that we don't have control of the bathrooms when there are other types of businesses that are not licensed by the BBC? That seems to be a big conversation and concern for licensed estheticians. 965. 965 is about posting the licenses, and often the owners of the establishments have a certain aesthetic, and this is kind of problematic because they want to have like the name of the licensees at the front desk, and we often work in a room out in the back. So how is it that, are we pushing back on these establishment holders where we're actually posting them? I know some of the chains are a little bit more concerned with that, obviously, than the people that are just solo and renting a room. And then on 978, no disinfectant container if it is empty. Are you guys even inspecting for that? If there's a blue jar of Quats on the counter and then there's no empty jar stashed somewhere in the establishment, are you actually accounting for that? Often, when somebody uses the last of something, they do get rid of it. So are we being cited in case some sort of janitorial situation was happening with a non-licensed individual, like a receptionist that does some cleanup for us? Is that something that we're going to be cited for if they decide to throw away that bottle when it's empty? Just wondering. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And at this time, before we go to our next section, which will be 980A, we would like to take this opportunity to take a quick pause for a 10-minute break. So we will pause this meeting and be back at 12:50. 12:50, that's not right. That's 12:55. We will pause and we will return at 12:55. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just to make sure we are all back on the line, we are going to go ahead and do a roll call. So I will turn it over to Marcine to go ahead and call the roll.
Okay, great. Jackie Crabtree, Reese Isbell,
Here.
Paul Bryson, Lorianne Burr,
Here.
Dee Dee Crossett. I believe we lost Dee Dee too.
Yes.
Okay. Brandy Hamilton,
Here.
Brandon Hart,
Here.
Paula Johnson,
Here.
Mark Rearson,
Here. Yep.
Leslie Rosti,
Here.
Yumi Yoon, I'm sorry. Okay, going back to Jackie Crabtree.
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. And Paul Bryson. Did I get Paul? Still missing Paul and
Yumi?
And Yumi. So we're missing 3 right now. And we know Dee Dee's not coming back. So it's just Paul and Yumi.
All right, we'll just give them another minute. Unfortunately, we can't really tell when those have people are back. So if we have Paul Bryson or Yumi Yoon coming back with us, please let us know.
I see Paul's camera. Paul, are you there? Cannot hear you, Paul.
How about now?
There we go. Thank you.
I was back from lunch on time, but the system glitched when I tried to get back in. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And Yumi? There's no Yumi at this point.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and continue. We have we'd like to get through at least the foot spa section before we end today's meeting. That would take us to page 26, and then we'll work with everyone to schedule our next meeting to complete this. And by then we'll have additional information to show you as well. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and start with section, we are on page 19, section 980A, incorrect disinfection of electrical tools. Oh, I'm sorry, I did just see that Dee Dee should be back on. She might need to be promoted. Yep, there we go. Dee Dee, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Thank you. Just wanting to check also, Yumi, are you there? Okay, moving on, we are at section 980A, incorrect disinfection of electrical tools. This is when we find a licensee using a dirty electrical tool, most commonly is hair clippers. And that is considered a high risk. We have ranked that, and we have $100 as the first offense. I would recommend this go in line with our previous, well, perhaps that should be increased. I would leave that open to the committee. If incorrect disinfection of electrical tools, if you feel that $100 should be higher. Okay, seeing no comments, we'll go ahead and move on. The next section is 980B. This is incorrect storage of electrical items. So this is the storage aspect of those items. We've made that a medium to high risk. The first offense is $50. Again, this is just the storage of it. That's why that fine is less than the previous violation, because the violation previously is for the tool being actually dirty. So any comments on section 980B? Okay, seeing no comments, we'll go ahead and move on. Section 980C is the incorrect storage of soiled electrical tools. The previous one was for the clean tools. Excuse me, and this is for the soiled ones. So the fine amount is the same, the $50, and we've also ranked that as a medium high risk. Any comments on this one? All right,
Hey, Chris.
seeing none. Yes.
I was just gonna, in terms of the storage, I'm thinking of, since as an esthetician and I've had a spa in a school, so I've kind of seen. For me, the clean and the dirty somewhat are this. I mean, I get why they're the same violation. The challenge is the fines do make a difference. I don't know if I would categorize it as a medium to low risk based on what we think could potentially be transferred. So maybe tweezing one, removing, I don't know, it could be nothing, and it could also be a bunch of tools in a drawer with a pen,
right,
attached gratuity, and I'm visualizing what sometimes the rooms look like, and I've been on the DRC as well. In talking to licensed people and in working with students, the fine amount does matter. So does the data show that once someone gets a $50 fine, are they less likely to go up to the next? Does that make a difference? Or do they tend to go 2 and 3 times before they're like, oh, wow, this is really serious?
I'm wondering if we can somehow get data on that to see. We've provided you with the amounts of first and second offenses and the types we've cited. But Carrie, I wonder, do you think we could pull data on how many times each of these have received second and third offenses?
Yeah, we can pull data on how many first, second, third offenses there were.
So maybe we could do that. Okay, so maybe we could incorporate that into this report, and then you would be able to see.
Does it work? Like if 50 was
right.
enough,
Exactly.
you know, or if it's like, $50, I'm going to pay and keep it moving. But once you get into these higher
Right.
dollar amounts, might be like, oh wow, I better stop.
Right.
Better
Okay.
stop doing this.
Yeah, let us pull some data on that and see what we can come up with if there's something that is obvious to us. Okay, and I just froze for a second, so sorry about that. Making sure I'm working. Okay, we're going to go on. Can one of my staff make sure that you can hear me? I am frozen completely, so.
This is the moderator. I can hear you, Christy. It just looks like your camera is kind of stuttering a bit.
Yes, lovely. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Next section would be. So just a note to my staff that's in the office, I cannot move my cursor anymore, so I will need to know if somebody raises their hands and wants to talk. Moving on to section 980.1. This is incorrect disinfection of pedicure foot spas. It is obviously one of our highest consumer harm situations, and it is a high. We obviously have that as a high risk, and we also have that as a $500 offense. That might seem low, but keep in mind this is per chair. So if we find incorrect disinfection in, let's just say we know they're not using the correct disinfectant solution, and they have 10 chairs, they're getting fined $500 per chair up to, of course, the $5,000 cap. We did not personally recommend any changes with that. So I would open that up to any comments.
And Chrissy, this is Dee Dee. For the foot spa, they
Dee Dee, I think we lost you.
I think I lost you out there. So the violations are going, they're not necessarily catching them in the act typically. They're doing the violation based off of if they've updated the foot spa log.
The foot spa log is a separate violation, so that'll be next. This is if we actually find a dirty foot spa. So this is, again, not using liners, using a piped foot spa. And this is when if we opened up a foot spa chair and find it, that you can tell that the really gross chairs that have nothing, that they're not cleaning at all. They're not following the procedures for actually cleaning that piped foot spa, and they're not using a liner. Did that answer your question, Dee Dee? The logs will come next, so there's a separate fine for that.
Got it. So this is when they visually see something.
Correct. I will go to Leslie, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. I have a question. Do we know what happened? I'm assuming maybe liners between 2016 and 2017 that dropped the numbers so like low from 72 to 24 times, and then ultimately down to 12 times it was cited in 2019. And then my second question is, why, I understand that it's $500 a chair, but why does it not increase on the second and third offense? If you're not going to change your behavior at $500 a chair, then maybe you need to have a higher thing the next time, type of a thing. So 2 questions.
So I believe the reason why those have dropped is because most salons are now using liners, which is going to come up in another section. So that's the first one. I definitely think we are finding this less and less. especially to what we were finding back in 2016 or even before. Most salons are using liners now. And then I believe when the committee that looked at this in the past kept that at 500 for every offense because it could go so high with the multiple chairs.
Thank you.
And staff, just so you know, I still am frozen. I cannot use my mouse, so you will have to tell me if someone has their hand up. Or if someone does not have their hand up.
And Christy, for the visual on that, they have to, if there were 10 chairs, for example, and they were all getting hit with a $500 fine, the inspectors, as I remember from being on DRC, they're actually taking a photo, right? So it's,
yes,
there's a visual. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes. Okay, I am just pausing for a second because evidently my Teams is not working either. I think, okay, no other hands. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on. And I apologize for the technical difficulties we are having. The next section is specifically to the logs. We have ranked that as a medium risk, and that first offense is $100. Any comments on that? I'm hearing none and seeing none. We will go ahead and move on. Section 980.1G. This is the requirement to put a sign on a chair that is not in service. And that first offense is $50. That is a low to medium risk. They usually are definitely out of service. So this is just for the sign that we want people to post on it. I don't personally have any recommendations to change this. Any comments? My technical difficulties seem to have resolved themselves, so I can see you now. And I'm seeing no comments. We will go ahead and move on. This next section is 980.2. This is incorrect disinfection of a pipeless foot spa. You can see, again, these numbers are going lower and lower, mostly because of the allowance for liners in California. So this is a high risk if these procedures are not followed. First offense is 500, same as the previous for the piped foot spas. I would have no recommendations to change this.
I'm sorry, what number are we on again?
We are on 980.2, incorrect disinfection of the pipeless foot spas. So this is page 22 of the report. All right, going to go ahead and move on.
Whoa. Hold on. Paul Bryson here.
Oh,
sorry.
yes, go ahead, Paul.
Okay. This is we're talking about the pipeless foot spa where they use the liner, correct?
This is no liner.
No liner. Okay,
correct.
Never mind.
Okay, we're getting to the liners. Okay, section 980.2 B7 with some other numbers. This is the incorrect missing log for the pipeless foot spa. So this is just referring to a log of a pipeless foot spa with not using liners. And this we have ranked as a medium risk with a first offense of 100, much like the previous one for the piped foot spas. I would have no recommendations to change this. All right, seeing none, we will move on. This next section, 980.2F, is the not in service sign for the for this type of chair. And again, it's a $50. It's a low to medium. I think it's important right now to bring up that our health and safety regulations do change the procedures for the foot spa regulation. And I'm sorry, I should have brought that up in the beginning. These have been combined. So I think this might look different once regulations are being changed. But I'd like us to just go ahead and finish our discussion on the foot spas to get your input as well. So again, this is just the not in service. It's the $50 fine. Any comments on that? And seeing none, we will move on to 980.3, incorrect disinfection of non-whirlpool foot basins per unit. So this is a portable basin. Again, we're not talking about liners yet. This first offense is $100. It's a lower dollar amount because it's been our experience that it's been the foot spa chairs that have caused the most consumer harm, not necessarily the portable tubs. However, there is still a risk, and we do have this risk set at high. Any comments on that? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Kind of the same things that we've already discussed. The next one is the missing log with a $50 offense in the medium. And then the one after that is a little bit different because those portable tubs have to be stored correctly. We have ranked this as a low risk for how they are stored. And the first offense on that is $50. So I'm going to assume there's no comments on the missing log because it's the same as the previous two. Any comments on the storage of the foot basins or tubs? Seeing no comments, we will go to the next one. This is the incorrect disinfection of foot spas, foot basins or tubs after use of a disposable liner. So it's not following the procedures that have been laid out after you have a liner in use. That first offense is $500. We have rated this as a low, and the reason why it's rated as low is because they've used a liner. And I will go ahead and open this up to go to Paul. So go ahead.
Hello. Hi. Yeah. If the board has not seen any consumer harm come from the basin not being cleaned and disinfected after the use of the liner, I would say in this case that the fine is inordinately high, given it's such a low risk level. And moreover, someone who intended to call in today but couldn't connect wanted to jump on the regulation itself. Why is it necessary to disinfect the basin if you're using a liner? Why not just clean the basin?
Right.
Why isn't that enough? So I'll just put that on an email for you to consider later. But with regard to the fines, I think it was such a low risk. Why is the fine so high? That's all I have to say.
And I agree. I will go to Dee Dee for next comment.
Hi there. The only thing also just coming off of a pandemic, I think the habit that we usually teach the students and anybody working in the industry is that we're always disinfecting everything that could come into contact with the client every time. And so it just makes sense. Just because there's a liner in there, it doesn't mean that, you know, contact didn't touch something and then touch the basin or the client touched it. Or the point is every single time someone rolls through, we're disinfecting the entire station, any possible cross contamination. So I wouldn't want it to just because they're using a liner doesn't mean there wasn't a crack in the liner, or doesn't mean that somebody didn't touch something or sneeze or all the other things that could have happened.
Okay, I'm going to go to Reese next.
I would agree with Dee Dee and say that the disinfection is pretty important to me. Thank you.
We'll go to Leslie next.
Well, also, would this be used when you discover that somebody isn't replacing the liner every time, that they're perhaps rinsing them out and hanging them up to dry? I mean, that is a thing that happens. I know we like to think it doesn't happen, but people do reuse the liners. And would that come under this?
I believe so, yes. All right, any other comments
I'm
on
sorry, I was
this?
just looking at 980.4, it says failure to maintain supply of liners. So maybe that falls under that one.
I think what she's talking about is it would fall under not
Right.
disposing of a.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not quoting you properly, but anything you're not supposed to disinfect, you're supposed to dispose of. They're taking what's in the liner and just dumping it down the sink anyway. So you do have to disinfect it, because if you just keep covering something up with plastic, you could grow bacteria between inside the basin and outside the plastic.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Leslie and Reese, I see your hands are still up. I'm not sure if that's from before.
My bad.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pose the question then that do we think this should have a lower fine, or 500 acceptable at this time? And again, I'm actually, let me rephrase my point. I think we'll hold off on that until our next meeting, when we can look at how the proposed regulations would impact this section, if that's all right with the committee.
Perfect.
Okay. The next section is the log. They do have to still have a log. So again, it goes in line with all the requirements previously noted as the log. I'm going to guess that no one has any comments on that. We've all been good on the ones before, but I'm looking. And then our last item is 980.4, the failure to maintain the supply of liners. So this is the fact that you have to maintain 5 liners per tub in your salon. And that is a medium to high risk. And we have a fine of $250 for that. So are there any comments on that?
So I ran downstairs and
Dee Dee.
So if they, and I don't have it memorized, but is it similar to not having enough barbicide or EPA registered disinfectant? Because to me, it's kind of just in terms of consistency. I don't have the. And then also, if it have anything to do with it.
Dee Dee, I lost you. I'm not sure
If
if
you're in a
anyone
shop
else.
that's jamming like 12 people a day, then 5 actually wouldn't be enough. I don't know how you gauge it, but especially coming out of this world where people are just hustling to make money, I would hate for somebody, they're going to take the client most likely. They're not going to not take the client because they don't have a liner.
True, and it is, one of the things we see often is a mixture of foot spas being used with liners and some not being used with liners. We've walked in and seen clients in all different situations, so it is a difficult one to kind of put a number to. Any other comments on this one? I see no more comments. I would like us to stop at this point. We have covered a lot of ground, and we are in our 3.5 hours into our meeting. So with that, we will go ahead and open this up to public comment for the sections that have been discussed since our last public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on these items, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Right, it looks like we have a request for comment from Wendy Cochran. Once again, Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Hi, obviously foot spas are not my thing, but I am in contact with Jamie Schrabuck, who is teaching in New York right now, and she'd like to pass along that waterless pedicures would really help this problem. And with regard to contamination of a foot spa by sneezing, I mean, these are feet, they're not faces. You're not going to be spreading any sort of communicable diseases. I don't think that you're going to be spreading a cold to somebody in case somebody accidentally sneezes into a foot spa. So thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears that was our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right. And then I also see that Dee Dee still has her hand raised. I don't know if that was left over from last time or if she has an additional comment.
Oh yeah, my bad. I'll take it down. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, that being our last item for today on this topic, we are going to go ahead and pause here with this review, and we'll be coordinating the next meeting date with all of you all. I want to thank you all for all your input on this. It's been, I think, a very valuable conversation. With that, we're going to go ahead and move to the next agenda item, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. So any public comment not related to any item that is on the agenda can now be, we can open for public comment for that.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. Right, it looks like we have a request from Wendy Cochran. Great, Wendy, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, 15-second warning, and I will request to unmute your microphone now.
All right, thank you very much. Both Jamie Schrabuck, Precision Nails, and myself, California Aesthetic Alliance, we would like to point out that many of the worst case consumer harm, including amputations, never get reported to the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. We both urge this committee to think beyond what can be observed in inspection to what actually happens during the course of the service that goes horribly wrong. This committee should recommend that legislation be passed requiring notification of settlements over a certain dollar amount, just like you see with the medical board as it requires. Another thing to consider in this legislation, on behalf of California Aesthetic Alliance, is that licensees are indeed required to carry a nominal or a minimal amount of liability insurance, protecting both the licensee and the consumer as well. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and we will move on to our next individual who has requested public comment, Jamie Schrabuck. Jamie, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
Me because I am stuck in New York City in a convention center. But I want to thank Wendy Cochran for sharing the information that I wanted shared with this committee today. And I regret that I wasn't able to listen in on everything, but I look forward to future meetings. And I understand they need to get this through quickly, but I would hope that we would take our time where it's necessary so that we don't push through to the board, something that we're going to have to revisit shortly. Thank you so much.
All right, this is the moderator, and it appears that was our last request for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. All right, and our last item on the agenda is any suggestions for future agenda items. Of course, this is going to be a big one that will be coming back to this committee. However, this is the opportunity if a committee member has a suggestion that they would like added to the agenda of a future meeting on for discussion. Now's the time to tell us. Dee Dee, I think your hand is raised. I'm having
Yeah, thank
technical
you.
difficulties.
As part of the health and safety on this committee, if we're working on the citations and the regs, is it possible to consider, like, if you get a ticket in traffic school and instead of paying the fine, or you could have the fine lessened by doing education? Is that something that this committee would look into or that we could consider? Because I know with the hands-on kind of body kinesthetic learners, the people that we have in this industry, they would do a lot. When I noticed on DRC, sometimes people were getting violations and they really didn't get it, right? And I was spending a lot of time like explaining after the fact, like, this is how you're going to disinfect this, or this is what the labeling means. Is that an opportunity, or would that not fall under this committee?
I think that's a great idea. I think we could definitely look into adding that to the agenda.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further comments from our committee, we will open this item up for public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the committee, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A feature located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. All right, and we have a request from Wendy Cochran. Wendy, once again, 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
To kind of piggyback off of Dee Dee's comment there, it seems to me that this is something that the schools actually fall down on, not explaining to the candidates, the students that are coming out of these schools. So now that we don't have the practical examination to kind of waste our time on, if you will, perhaps maybe more and in-depth, comprehensive teachings of these rules and regulations should actually happen at the schools. Having a group of 7,500 licensed estheticians, I can tell you that they do not understand these rules and regulations, and it's not because they've forgotten because they've been in the industry for 20, 30 years. We have brand new students that have no idea even how to find the website for the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. So I think that we should probably maybe focus on the onus of the schools of taking more responsibility and teaching the licensed candidates the rules and regulations that they're signing on the line to accept their license for. Thank you very much.
All right, this is the moderator, and we have a request for comment from Jamie Schrebeck. Jamie, you'll have 3 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone now.
This is so different on a phone. This is Jamie Schrebeck from Precision Nails again. And because workers' rights are within the purview of the Health and Safety Committee, I would ask that it's not a priority, but that we look at what the new legislation AB 1003 means for our industry now that it's passed. That concerns wage theft. And now we have a new bill that's been proposed, AB 1820, that would create a labor trafficking unit within Cal OSHA. That would also impact our industry. Thank you.
All right. This is the moderator, and that appears to be our only request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
All right. And then I think I see a hand from Dee Dee.
Oh, I think it was leftover. All right. I see no further comments. I believe I just want to double check with staff to make sure we have no further comments because I'm continuing to have technical difficulties. Just making sure. Moderator, can someone tell me? Anyone?
I don't see any raised hands, so I think we're okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, thank you. With that, we will adjourn this meeting and we will be in touch with all of you on scheduling our next meeting. Thank you all so very much for attending.
Thank you.
Have a good week.